Live from the NHL Draft in Nashville, presented by Coolbet, Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily, with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Welcome to NHL Draft. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you. And yes, we made it. We'll get into all of that in a minute. First off, though, it is great to finally be here. There is a lot of excitement around the city, and certainly here at the Encore Las Vegas, the media hotel, as everyone's getting accredited and getting ready for the NHL Awards tonight, which we're going to take in and try and bring you some content on the WST channel, expecting Connor Hellebuyck to win a second Vezina Trophy. And then tomorrow, for round one of the NHL Draft, the remaining picks made on Saturday, also at the Sphere, and potentially some pretty big moves that are being rumored around the Winnipeg Jets and the rest of the National Hockey League leading into a Canada Day free agent frenzy in the NHL. First things first, we have to thank our great partners at Coolbet for making this trip possible and bringing to you all the latest on the Winnipeg Jets, the NHL Draft, and the sight and sounds of the, well, right now it seems like the final full NHL Draft with all NHL teams coming here, being a part of it, which really is the true one hockey convention of the National Hockey League each and every year. Kind of hope that it stays the way that it is, but doesn't look like that'll be the case. So they're going out with a bang tomorrow at the Sphere. But today over at the Fontainebleau Hotel just down Las Vegas Boulevard to see the NHL Awards. So we're going to get into all of that. Some big news, very interesting news coming out from many of the insiders. And now that the buyout window will be officially be open, we're starting to hear some buyouts. Mike McIntyre is going to join us. And, of course, Mike and Ken had a pretty extensive piece in the Winnipeg Free Press focusing on the Rucker-McGroarty situation. I can tell you, that has been the top topic that we've been kicking around with many of our friends from other markets, and a lot of intrigue as to how this ends up. But, you know, whether you're talking to Ken or Mike or Murat, they have all been pretty clear that they expect a trade to happen before the draft. So that could happen while we're on the air today. It could happen this evening. It could happen tomorrow. Or Kevin Cheveldayoff could hold his cards, be in no rush to make a move, and play it later out. There's still 2 more years of the rights of Rucker-McGroarty, but it will be very interesting to see that how that all turns out, and if they do make a move, what that means for both the short and the long-term future of the Winnipeg Jets. But again, a huge thanks to Pat and Jake at Coolbet. Jake's actually going to join us a little later on today on the program because there's some pretty neat NHL draft props that you might want to get into if you do like to make the odd sprinkle. I made a couple before I left, but we'll talk about how things are looking right now at Coolbet. And Grant McCagg from Recrutes.ca, we always try and have a visit with Grant over the course of draft week. So Grant's going to join us after Mike McIntyre in the second half of the show to talk more about the players available, the glut of defensemen expected to be picked early on, and the challenges historically of picking defensemen at 18 years old and how they project. In addition to our great partners at Coolbet, our presenting sponsor of our Vegas shows, do want to thank all of the sponsors of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Don't forget, I know we did miss a show yesterday. Hopefully that gave you all an opportunity to check out our newest show on WST, CFL 110 with myself and Jeff Hamilton. That is live right now, and that is brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg at 999-1234. Also want to thank Rolly's Transfer, Consolidated Supply, Manitoba Battery, Princess Auto, Canadian Club, Little Brown Jug, Wallace & Wallace, F Apparel, The Beer Can, next door in Hoagie Boys, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, the Winnipeg Gold Eyes, Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge, Assiniboia Downs, Breezy Bend, and we will get to a why not question of the day for our friends at Waverly, not Autocorp, over at Waverly and McGillivray. All right, let's get Michael Remis in here and get this show on the road. We finally made it. We got set up, and now it's go time in Sin City, and it really gets going today. As soon as we're done the show, we'll be heading down the block to hopefully see our guy Connor Hellebuck get another Vezina trophy. What's up?
Yeah, I saw on X that his dad Chuck Hellebuck in the house, the whole family here expecting a Vezina trophy win. So we will be there in attendance. Looking forward to checking that out. And yeah, we made it. And apologies for missing yesterday. I mean, our first missed show in 3 years. I mean, I think it was an incredible run. It had to come to an end. I blame the airlines. Do you want to talk about what we went through?
Well,
we finished the show early on Tuesday to try to get here Wednesday.
Yeah, if people had missed it, and by the way, show like the passion and the consistency of especially our YouTube crew was evident because our numbers were great for the live show done 2 hours earlier than we normally do it. And if you didn't catch it or knew that we were doing it, then you might have just come to the normal YouTube page just after 1 o'clock and realized that the show was already finished. But yeah, we were supposed to fly out at 4:15 from Winnipeg to Denver. So we finished the show at 1. We were racing around. We got a note that, okay, the flight's been delayed till 6:30. But we were worried that we were going to miss our connector. So we still went down relatively early. They said, yeah, whatever, no problem. We'll put you on the later flight to Denver. Hopefully you'll make it. If not, you'll stay over there and then go first thing in the morning. All right. Well, best of a bad situation. The one positive was got a chance to watch Canada beat Peru. Shout out to Jonathan David. Big goal, huge game against Chile coming up in the Copa. That was awesome. After about another 2 hours of waiting or so, got delayed to 10. And then we were informed that the flight was canceled. And that's the terror point of the event because not only are you not getting to where you need to go that night, but you need to go get your bags. And then you need to go back out and get in a line.
Yeah.
Which takes, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours if your bags weren't first to come out to get rebooked. So anyways, we went through all of that, got back up early yesterday morning. But because we then had to fly to Vancouver, had a relatively short layover, and then the Vancouver to Vegas flight. We were literally in the air all day long, and there was absolutely no way that we were going to be able to do the show. I did tweet out, I was almost positive that because of that, Rucker McGroarty or something massive with the Jets was going to happen, but luckily it didn't. So there was no reason to, by the time we got here relatively late, to fire anything up. We're going to get to all of it today. And as I mentioned, Mike McIntyre is going to join us coming up at the bottom of the hour, and we'll make it happen. But we got it here. We're all set up. The hotel's unreal. I'd love to. I mean, the backdrop's awesome. The reason why we have to have it up is that it's blazing sunshine and 44 degrees Celsius here right now. But we're on the 53rd floor, right down to our right. You can see the Sphere, which has a big Grateful Dead logo on it right now. Well, it's actually pretty trippy. And the wind is right. The wind is right behind us. And the Sphere is where the action's going to be at tomorrow. So stay tuned to our socials throughout the weekend. We'll, although Instagram doesn't seem to work for me down here, we'll throw some stuff up out on X, probably our favorite platform. And, both of the sights and sounds of everything, and then obviously get down to business what everyone in our audience cares the most about, and that is what is Kevin Cheveldayoff up to, who's getting picked by the Winnipeg Jets, and how this team and organization looks kind of a week into the future. But not surprisingly, the first people we saw yesterday, Pagnotta, Bernstein, our buddies from the fourth period, talked to Aaron Ward a little bit. And not surprisingly, first off, the Rucker McGroarty situation. And as I say, we're going to really dive into this with Mike a little bit later on because he and Ken have been extensively working the phones and making all this happen. But it's amazing. And I had a text from a friend that was going through some of our prior content, like with Rucker on the program, and he said it's like either the McGroarty camp or the Jets have had a lobotomy or something like that, because things have just completely changed so much over the course of the last week, at least publicly. But obviously this goes back to as late as the Frozen Four. But I don't know, man. Now that we're here and we're it seems to be things are so etched in stone that this prospect is going to be moved on. You have to think that it maybe goes back a little further than that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it, because, we had Rutger on, and ever since he got drafted, he said all the right things. He mentioned growing up, like being a Winnipeg Jets fan. It was from Iowa area. Nebraska, thank you, one of those in there. So I was like, has Rutger been pulling one on us this whole time? But obviously, the relationship, we saw him at development camp last year, and he was the star, signing autographs, doing all the right things. And for it to get to this point where you're hearing from all the insiders, Mike and Ken have a thing in the Free Press, which we'll be talking to Mike about shortly, that, now he's on the way out. It seems odd because, there's so many people in our chat that, fan favorites of Rutger, people talk about getting Rutger jerseys. He hasn't even played for the organization yet. So it's certainly disappointing for a prospect who had a lot of promise here. You thought was captain material. But maybe there's excitement saying, okay, well, if he's such a great prospect, someone would want to give up something. And we've seen Kevin Cheveldayoff before in tight spots, like this time last year with Pierre-Luc Dubois. And he pulled a rabbit on his hat, made a trade that, LA, had to undo just a week ago. So we'll see what happens with the Rutgers situation, but certainly interesting. And Nikolai Ehlers as well. You pull up Frank Saravelli's trade board, and in the top 5, it's who Mitch Marner was on there. He was number 1. And then I think 3 and 4, it's Rutger and Ehlers. And I'm just feeling like we were last year with Scheifele and Hellebuck on there. And, of course, Dubois. And now it's Rutger and Ehlers watch.
I'll say this, I'll speak out of two sides of my mouth here. As a Jets fan and a Winnipeg guy, I mean, it's really disappointing, that this has come to it with McGroarty. And listen, I may think very differently after a trade's made, or, if this turns out to be really good for the organization. I mean, it's about winning hockey games, and he was just such an exciting prospect. And obviously in our conversations with him, connected with the fan base and got people legitimately excited about him. So it is really too bad that we are where we are. That being said, as the host of Winnipeg Sports Talk, it is, it feels like we're right back in Nashville last year as really the center of attention. And I'll be honest, I didn't think that was going to be even close to the case a month ago. We thought, there'd be some talk about the Ehlers situation moving forward, but maybe a quieter night on Friday. There's a chance the Jets are back in the first round making a pick, or potentially using a pick that they get from any sort of Rutger McGroarty deal to doing something else. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time with Mike diving into all of that. And then, of course, Ehlers. And like McGroarty for us, I think, is the most fresh and, topical bit. But Ehlers is, I've been asked by Ehlers by half a dozen people already as far as, what kind of I've been hearing and that. And, the answer isn't a whole lot because we know how the Jets operate. And I do think that it's far from a sure thing that Ehlers is moved. And I think a big part of that is the new head coach and what we've heard from Scott Arniel. And I do personally hold out for the possibility that Ehlers comes in, is not dealt, plans to play out his contract, and maybe is in a little bit of a different situation or is handled a little bit differently with Scott Arniel. And, maybe his thoughts on moving forward is changes a little bit. All that could change in 5 minutes, so we could get an alert that something has happened. So McGroarty and Ehlers, the biggest names that we're hearing in and around the media, the scuttlebutt, if you will, heading into the draft. But far from the only team that has some big moves and changes on the other thing. And just quickly, while we're talking Jets, of course, tonight, as I mentioned, is the awards. Connor Hellebuck amongst the NHL stars up for awards, and looking forward to seeing what Helly's got on the red carpet tonight, and hopefully we'll see him grab another Vezina. We may have to talk to Chuck. Maybe Chuck could 3D print some mini Vezina trophies that would look good on a WST set, if you will.
Yeah, he's going to be in attendance. I did take a look at the celebrities for the awards tonight. Jay Farrow, comedian from SNL, he's actually coming to Rumors Comedy Club in Winnipeg. I was excited for Gaten Matarazzo, the kid from Stranger Things, Dustin, for all the Stranger Things fans out there. So we're in Vegas. The awards, it is hot out. I don't know. Do I have to wear a suit to the awards? I did bring one, but man, it's 40 plus out here. It didn't feel as hot as I thought it was gonna be, but it was warm.
I have to say those pants I got, those white pants, which I originally got for a wedding in Mexico, knowing that they would be able to be amazing pants to wear to white out in playoff games. I think are going to get their third run, and it's going to be here in Vegas right now. And listen, we've got our nice WST golf shirts. We're here in a professional capacity, so I don't think you'll see me in anything other than a golf shirt with the lanyard around it, and we'll take it from there. We won't wear shorts. How about that? That's a nice compromise.
No shorts? Okay, I brought a suit, and you said don't wear the jacket because it'll be too hot. And I was like, well, you got to wear the jacket so it covers up all the sweat stains because it's 42 degrees out and your shirt's going to be see-through.
It is.
Just from here walking to wherever you need to go.
The funniest thing is we got up this morning and I was looking out at the at the city and the Sphere, and I mean it's so hot so early right now, and the Sphere looked like it had all this like molten lava or whatever. And I'm like, it basically is the sun. This is probably what it feels like this far away from the sun. That's how hot it is right now. So anyways, that's the plan. Keep your eyes peeled, or just keep posted. Maybe turn your notifications on for at Sports Talk WPG on X. And we'll fire out some content a little later on today. Pictures and whatnot from Hellebuck and the NHL awards tonight. Listen, so we're going to get to all the big Jet stories with Mike coming up. We'll break down some more draft talk with Grant McCagg. We'll get to some draft props with Jake Bolin Moss a little bit later on. But one thing that I do want to get to, Remo, is a couple of the stories. And this is a former Jet. Well, a couple former Jets have been in the news lately. First of all, Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, Dubois is a member of the Washington Capitals. You knew that Dennis Bernstein would be all over us to talk about what we've heard, about the trade. So we had a little chat on that. But I did not have on my bingo card Jacob Trouba, New York Rangers captain, potentially being dealt. He had the no move. It's now, I believe, a 15-team no trade list. And apparently, Remo, he's been asked for his list. And, we won't even get to speculating about whether Winnipeg is on his list or not. But for a guy that, worked so hard to get traded and sign his long-term deal in New York for a myriad of reasons, this will be, it's probably tough for the Trouba camp to take right now, considering he's the captain of this hockey club, made a long-term commitment there. They certainly went through a lot to work their way to New York, as we in Winnipeg know very well. But his stock has dropped a little bit. Certainly, they've got some great other defensemen. He's potentially playing in a third pairing role, though a huge part of the PK, and doing a lot of things that maybe don't end up on the stat sheet. I'll admit, even though you knew that he had some ups and downs last year, was taking some criticism in the playoffs, I couldn't have imagined that they'd be moving on from Jacob Trouba.
Yeah, they have a number of defensemen. Keandre Miller's taken a step forward. Braden Schneider, Eric Gustafsson, solid when called upon. They're working on an extension with Ryan Lindgren, and they have Adam Fox. So Jacob Trouba he's got 2 years left at $8 million AAV. I think that's tough. And, we've talked, Patrick Laine is a player whose name has come up in trade talks, and we're like, bring him bring him home. But for a guy who's got a 15-team no trade clause, I don't think there's any way Trouba will be brought home. No reuniting with Josh Morrissey. They've got their top pair in Dylan DeMello, but it'll be interesting where he lands up. He's number 8 right now, coinciding with his jersey number on Frank Saravalli's trade targets board. He suggests, maybe Detroit, who just freed up some salary, giving away Jake Wallman with a second-round pick. And they got a lot of cap space there, and he's from Michigan. Maybe that's a team that would be interested. But, he works his way to New York, signs the extension. And
do they have a hospital there?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's why he went there for his girlfriend, now wife. He wanted to be in the U.S., so we'll see what happens there. But that would be trading the captain. That's a big one for the Rangers.
It would be. It was a. And again, I don't have any skin in the game with the Rangers whatsoever. Not really a team that I follow particularly close, although they're damn good. So we end up talking about them a lot in and around the playoffs for the last couple of years. I found it interesting that he was named the captain, and now we're at a point where they're looking to move on. They've got plenty of other candidates that could be a really good captain, and of course you got Adam Fox, that is signed and clearly a number one. And Trouba, hey, he's a guy I'd still love to have on my team. He does a lot of those things, although I think he has fallen off a little bit, and there is the reckless nature of his play that certainly comes up in a lot of conversations as well. But I'll tell you what, in and around playoffs, pretty hard not to want a guy like that. I think there will be plenty of I think he's got 2 years left on his deal.
2 years, $8 million per. And I got to say, when they named him captain, I was like, wait, Chris Kreider wasn't already the captain? I was kind of surprised. Yeah, 2 years, $8 million. So the price tag's pretty big, and I think that sometimes the decision making of you saw that in the playoffs at times with him, and I think it's just all about freeing up salary. They did waive Gaudreau, who got picked up by the Sharks before, so I don't know if they've got something up their sleeve here.
That was
agency.
A scam move too. That was a total scam move, because the Sharks were on his no trade list.
Yeah,
and Drury and Greer are old buddies.
Yeah, they played on the Sabres.
And he's like, how about this? You guys are the worst team in the league. We'll just waive them, and you can pick them up. Right on. Let's do it.
And they didn't even tell Gaudreau ahead of time. He found out. I don't know if he found out on Twitter or what, but I mean, you sign a free agent contract with someone, and then they just dump you on waivers, and you're on the worst team in the league. It's a tough sell, but hey, it's that kind of business. They're trying to win, and sometimes you got to make those tough moves and screw someone over, right, Huss?
Yeah, it has been known to happen, and it seems like Chris Drury's got some cutthroat in him in as well. So, anyways, the Trouba situation, something that we'll be paying attention to. The other one, and I did not think that we'd get to this point, but Steven Stamkos is just a few days away from hitting the open market for the first time in his NHL career. And we all remember the fateful afternoon when the two of us were doing the warm-up, the 2 to 3 show before the afternoon ride. And in the matter of 40 minutes, all during that show, Steven Stamkos decides to not go to free agency and stay in Tampa. PK Subban is traded 1-for-1 for Shea Weber. And what was the other one?
The Taylor Hall, Adam Larson.
Taylor Hall for Adam Larson. The trade is 1-for-1.
That one was 1-for-1.
So they're, Steven Stamkos going to market. And, we were talking off air about this. If Stamkos gets out there, there's already been rumored interest from Nashville, from Detroit. He's 34 years old. He had 5 goals in 5 playoff games. I mean, the guy is still very, very productive. He sort of reminds me of a more decorated Joe Pavelski at the time when Pavelski hit the market and ended up signing that, what was it, a 3-year deal with the Dallas Stars?
Yeah.
And he was worth every cent for Dallas through those 3 seasons. Despite being on the other side of 35, Joe Pavelski put up huge numbers and was a big part of a team that, has been a legit Stanley Cup contender for the last number of seasons.
Yeah, I thought that was a good comparable. I mean, Stamkos point-per-game player, 81 points in 79 games, 40 goal scorer. He can still put the puck in the net, as you said, 5 goals and 1 assist in 5 playoff games. Team with Detroit. Yzerman's the GM there. He was the GM in Tampa before. Is that a connection? Nashville, looking for scoring. One team I want to mention every time. I don't know if you go there, but Utah, they've got so much cap space. Are they going to make some kind of big splash in free agency? It might be on defense. They don't really have any defensemen under contract. But if Stamkos wearing a different jersey, that'd be. I don't know if I guess it just happens. Guys play for a long time and eventually move on. We saw Pavelski make a nice career with Dallas after. I wonder what would happen with Stamkos there, where he's going to end up. So that's a big name to watch as well as we approach free agency.
Yeah, he will be right there. Ryan Suter. I mean, is that official that the buyouts happened?
I saw Jeff Merrick tweet that he was getting bought out, and yeah, the buyout window. What is it open tomorrow? When's the official?
Well, game 7 was Monday.
Yeah.
And it was 48 hours after that. So I guess today's Thursday, right? Don't even know what day it is, considering how the last couple have gone. The buyouts will begin to happening, and that's something we'll talk to Mike about. Could the Jets free up some more cap space with the potential buyout of, for instance, a Nate Schmidt? I don't know, Neil Pionk's name has been brought up at times before. I don't see that as a possibility, but Schmidt could, although I would think it's somewhat unlikely. And, we'll get into a little bit more about, Jets targets for the blue line, whether it be via trade or on July 1st. Less urgency, I would say, on the right side with Dylan DeMello being re-inked for that 4-year deal a little earlier this week.
Yeah, I think that was a big signing for the Jets. We talked about his numbers, plus minus. He was among league leaders, 5-on-5 on-ice goal differential, which is slightly different. He was like 3rd in the league. So Morrissey and DeMello have become a very, very strong pairing. He was important to lock up. They don't have a lot on the right side as well. And so, you can just lock button now your top pair, Morrissey, DeMello. Brendan Dillon seems like he's going to free agency, so you still have Sandberg. Stanley's an RFA. You have Schmidt and Pionk under contract as well. And then Heinola, Salomonsson pushing up from the depth within the organization. So we'll see if there is another move to be made here on defense. I did see Jeff Merrick. He floated out Schmidt's name as a possible buyout candidate. I mean,
he's definitely a possible buyout. I don't think there's any question about that.
I mean,
he is possible as a buyout. Whether the Jets decide to do it is the other question.
I mean, he's a healthy scratch, he was a healthy scratch for a lot of the year. Although when he got in, he was solid. Him and Sandberg were a good pairing, but it's making a lot of money to be, in and out of the lineup, I think. So that's a decision Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to have to make.
Listen, I'll just say right now, and it'll be interesting to see what Mike says. I don't think they do it. For exactly the reason that you just mentioned. I mean, the guy's contract and his salary for this year, it is what it is, and you're on the books. And if you decide to buy him out, then all of a sudden you're kicking it down the can, and what is it, $6 million turns into $4 million split over 2 years. You're getting $4 million of cap space, but then you're going to have $2 million on the books next year, and you're not going to have him. And the bottom line was he a $6 million defenseman this past season? No, he wasn't. But we talked all year long about how that Sandberg-Schmidt pairing just simply was not getting scored on. And I think most teams and organizations will take that. Now, with Brendan Dillon likely moving on in free agency and Dylan Sandberg likely moving up into the top 4, that does open up another spot, and certainly Billy Heinola would be a potential guy for that. I think he will get a chance to be playing right away, and of course we're get to Elias Salomonsson, who is planning on coming over. And unlike certain players, it just says he's going to do everything he can to give the Winnipeg Jets a tough decision and try and make the team and earn a spot in the National Hockey League. We're going to get to that with Mike coming up in just a second. Of course, WSD at the NHL Draft presented by Coolbet. We'll have Jake Bolin Moss come and join us a little later on today. If you missed it yesterday when we were in transit and weren't able to do the show, I hope you checked out the new edition of CFL 110 with myself and Jeff Hamilton, presented by Garage Living Winnipeg. Folks, our pal Packadoo and the gang at Garage Living Winnipeg can revolutionize your garage and your workspace. If you're dealing with a lot of clutter, too much stuff there, maybe be having a hard time getting the car in there at some point, they specialize in changing everything about your garage into a beautiful, clean, functional garage that looks amazing and adds value to your home, specializing in stunning polyaspartic floor coatings, high-end main cabinet metal cabinets, slat wall and overhead storage solutions. Our pal Pat is ready for you to pop by and meet you and check your garage out and give you a free in-garage consultation of what is possible. Give him a call at 204-999-1234. Pat's been a vintage car guy for decades, part of the reason why he moved from 20 years at CBC into this new role. And whether you're, he knows garages, and whether you're talking about a 10-car garage mahal or a single-car garage in the back lane, he can come up with a design to meet your needs. Give Pat a call, 999-1234, Garage Living Winnipeg. Garage is made for living. Hey, if you've got to move this summer or in the fall or at any time, and you need trusted, secure, reliable movers, might I suggest our friends and great sponsors at Rowley's Transport, family owned and operated for 60 years, the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba, Winnipeg, and around southern Manitoba. They're all over the province on a daily basis, which means great routes, timing, and of course, the bottom line, great rates. And you can find out about that rate of what it's going to cost by going to their beautiful new website at Rowleys.com. Click up in the top corner, the request a quote feature. Let them know where you're moving, when you want to move, and what is going there with you. They'll turn it around with a real quick quote for you at a great price and take as much of the stress out of moving as possible. For your next move, use the most trusted name in moving, Rowley's Transfer. Go to Rowleys.com today and request your quote, and for more information on everything else that they can do. Shout out to our friends at Consolidated Supply. Man, they're busy right now as we get into the teeth of summer. They've got irrigation systems, artificial turf, golf carts, hot tubs, outdoor kitchens options for your property, and they are the leaders in small engine repair. Got that robot, the satellite-guided RTK robot mower from Cress as well. Pop by and see them today, 1395 Niagara Road East. The showroom's open to the public. So much great stuff there. You can also check them out online at cte.ca. And hey, whether we're talking about mowers or boats or campers, ATVs, this is the most fun time of the year, but you better make sure you've got power. And Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery are ready to power you and your family through summer with batteries of pretty much all shapes and sizes. And most importantly for you Winnipeggers, at the best prices possible. Beating the pants off the big box stores. Pop by and see them, Logan Avenue, or their new location over on Dovercourt Drive. And you can also check them out at ManitobaBattery.com. It's the latest. They got the Power Sports sale on right now. The best part about it is we know how busy everybody is. Any purchase over $60, they'll deliver it to you for free. Shout out to the gang, Donnie and his crew. Great crew and staff at Manitoba Battery. Visit them today online at ManitobaBattery.com. All right, let's dive into it. We have a lot to get to with Mike McIntyre, who joins us now on Winnipeg Sports Talk. We are here live in Vegas. Mike back in the peg. And Mike, from the sounds of it, you and your colleagues and really everyone in the Winnipeg media has been all over any tidbit of information we can get about how we got to this point with the Jets and Rutger McGroarty and what's next. I was particularly interested to talk to you this week because, Mike, you've been in contact with the McGroarty camp, the family. You were down at the Frozen Four. What was your reaction when you first heard that apparently things had somehow gone sideways between the two parties?
Well, my first reaction is that Rutger McGroarty, if you ask me, is probably getting some bad advice He's got a lot of people around him, a lot of handlers, a lot of other hockey parents in his circle, and it's a big circle. This is a kid who has grown up in the U.S. National Development Program, who is teammates of a number of players who have been, very high draft picks, and some of those players are now already playing in the NHL. So he is hearing things from various people, and he's probably seeing things happening with some of these friends and teammates. And I guess in his eyes, he wants similar treatment. The problem for Rucker McGroarty is he's part of an organization, at least right now, which tends to handle things a little differently than some of these teams like Columbus and Chicago, where his most recent line mates have been drafted and were thrown into NHL lineups at the end of last season. So, I think for him, there's a bit of fear of missing out, FOMO, if you will. Probably a lot of people in his ear telling him how things should be playing out. And it's really unfortunate. I got to know the kid a bit and his family, and a lot of Winnipeggers, Manitoba hockey fans probably felt they got to know him a bit last summer at development camp. And he really is a fresh air, a guy that this could be his town. He could be king here in a couple of years, and it looks like this relationship is probably over before it even really begins.
Yeah, and Mike, particularly you, we had him on last. We've had him on a couple times, and he just charmed, everybody. There's very few. In fact, I'm at a loss to think of any player, any draft pick, and we've talked to many of them through the Winnipeg Sports Talk era, as well as, the previous days at the old station. I can't think of anyone that's made as much of an impact just as a person on, the fan base and the level of excitement that generated, not to mention, how he's excelled at Michigan and the World Juniors and all that.
Right.
You were down with them the most recently of anybody down at the Frozen Four. Looking back now at the Frozen Four, do you think this happened after that, or was it sort of starting at that point from behind the scenes, from what you know now as opposed to what you know then?
No, I think the majority of this has happened post Frozen Four, because one thing that was very evident at the Frozen Four, Huss, was that the Jets had given Rucker McGroarty all kinds of time and space, and he appreciated that. He had a very busy hockey year, obviously had that significant injury mixed in as well. But with the run to a national championship with the World Juniors, the Jets had kind of been at arm's length with him, and they didn't want to feel, I guess, like they were pressuring him. So they gave him his space. That being said, the relationship between the Jets and McGroarty and his family, certainly from everyone I talked to, which included the family and the Jets, Jimmy Roy, for example, everybody was saying that it was a great relationship, that there was a lot of mutual respect, admiration, but it's become very clear that things did take a real turn after the Frozen Four, when the topic of now what, where do we go from here? And it's clear there was two very different sides or viewpoints, I guess, of how that should proceed. Going back to, when Rucker McGroarty's season ended, Huss, the Jets only had 2 games left in their regular season. And if you recall, at the time, a player like Cole Perfetti wasn't even in the lineup. The Jets were making that push to try and hold on to home ice advantage. And so Cole Perfetti, 19 goals, wasn't even in the lineup. The idea that they would throw Rucker McGroarty ahead of guys that had been here all year, that wasn't going to happen. And so the idea of getting him in this season immediately, I think, was probably the first warning sign if you were the McGroarty camp. And then I think when talk came to, okay, what does the immediate future? The Jets were not going to guarantee Rucker McGroarty a full-time roster spot as early as this fall. Would they love him to come in and have a great training camp and earn a job? Of course. If he could help the team, I think they would have given him every opportunity to do so. But the idea that he might have to go down to the American Hockey League, that he might have to work on his game down there, it's pretty clear that became a real disconnect here. And I don't completely understand it. Again, I go back to how some of McGroarty's teammates at Michigan, Brinley, Nazar, they got thrown into lineups. They'll probably be part of the Blue Jackets and the Blackhawks roster this year. Is it the case just where he looked around and said, well, maybe he's thinking I'm better than these guys and I'm going to have to go play in the A? But again, the Jets are in a very different spot right now. And for Rector McGroarty to think that his game, as good as season he had last year, he admitted that there were still things he had to work on. His skating, for sure, the pace of NHL play. It seems to me that that's where things really took a detour, and it was after the Frozen Four. And it would appear now, I guess never say never, but this relationship would seem to be one where it's perhaps beyond repair at this point. And so for people saying, well, why would the Jets want to trade McGroarty? Well, my understanding is they don't want to trade Rector McGroarty. They'd love to have this kid around. The problem is, if he's not going to sign, and he's an asset that there are teams right now, no doubt, that would probably put Rector McGroarty in their lineup right away. If you're the Jets, you can't really afford to sit on that asset. That's an asset that could either help you in the present or the future. And I think that's why the Jets are now exploring trade options.
Well, the one thing I'll disagree just slightly is that they can't afford to wait. I mean, they were going to wait anyways when he said that he was going back to school. Now, I guess there's more to that. That was, I think now knowing what has come out, that was more of a squeeze on the Winnipeg Jets to do something, with him, as opposed to him wanting to go back and be the captain and play a third season at Michigan.
Right.
But let's not forget that this is 2 years. I mean, if the whole point of this entire exercise is to get him into the NHL now, sitting out and waiting 2 years before making it to the NHL doesn't really seem to be probably the preferred course of action for that camp. But if it has soured to that point and they realize that this is sort of beyond the point of no return, which seems crazy they could have got to that from where it seemed to be just a month or two ago, you have to deal in the present and do what's best for the organization, and that will be the case. But back to your point earlier about, signing at the end of the Frozen Four, with the fact that they went as far as they did, was basically right at the end of the season.
Right.
I mean, I made that same point. We did a question the other day, Mike, and obviously this is a real polarizing topic on the program. And I had said, listen, is this a case of, an entitled player and people kind of, overstepping their bounds? Or did the Jets blow it by not doing what they had to do to get him into the lineup? And I think it was about 61%, kind of in favor of the Jets. Hey, not really their fault. This happens. And 39% that, they needed to do what they could do to get this guy in the lineup. And my response to that was, well, okay, you sign him at the end of the season and you bring him in because that's what they've demanded. And you said, okay, fine, we'll do it. Like, what sort of a problem does that create within the organization for a guy like Perfetti, who was already out after, to your point, having a very productive first half to the season before, hitting a wall? One way or the other, once you got to that point and you were getting this squeeze on from the McGroarty camp, someone was going to be bent out of shape. And I'll be honest, I think the Jets owe a hell of a lot more to Cole Perfetti with what he's done so far, being a part of this team, than someone that has yet to sign a contract and play a single game in the organization.
Yeah, and the wild card here, Huss, of course, is that, starting this fall, there's a new head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. And, so far, from what Scott Arniel has said, when it comes to he may approach compared to maybe some of the decisions Rick Bowness made. Now, on one level, you think, well, is that enough to give Rector McGroarty pause for thought to say, hey, maybe the way it was isn't necessarily going to be the way it's going to be? It would appear not. I would agree with your point, and I said that let's have no choice. There's not an immediate rush here, as you say, because they do hold his right, and they can afford to be patient. I guess to that cost, I'd say, should they be patient? If you have an asset that right now has significant value that you could turn into something that helps your team immediately. Either that's with a roster player or a draft pick that maybe you could do something with that. You could package him with someone else, and there's been talk of whether it's Nikolai Ehlers or maybe one of those contracts that they might want to unload, a Nate Schmidt. The bottom line is if you're the Jets and you're trying to win now, and that's kind of the mindset, that's part of the reason Rutger McGroarty isn't necessarily getting into the lineup right away, because you're in win now mentality. If you have an asset that can help you win now, I would think if you're the Jets, you certainly want to explore all your options as soon as possible. But to your overall point, for sure, the Jets do not have to trade Rutger McGroarty by the draft. They don't have to trade him by free agency. They could sit on this, and the ball is in his court right now, or the puck. He's elected to go back for another year at Michigan. That's his choice. The Jets could revisit this further down the road. I just don't know that they will. I think there's probably enough interest right now surrounding him that this is something that they would address sooner rather than later. And, you can imagine the development camp for next week. I mean, if let's just say they don't trade him in the next few days, is he showing up at development camp? He's kind of should be, right? He's their property. He's their draft pick. I just don't envision a scenario where that would be the case. But, it's a really unique and very interesting and fluid situation. And if I was betting, I would think very good chance he gets moved sooner than later, as in the next couple days here.
All right. Mike McIntyre is with us. For those of you that we've just got a little audio issue right now with Mike, and I've seen in the chat that people are saying it's a little it is a little soft or echoey for Mike. So, anyways,
no, it's not you, Mike. No, you don't need to do anything. It's me. You're hearing yourself talk from our end, and I'm freaking out here because I haven't been able to fix it, and you guys are talking for a long time, and I've been like, I need to step in and do this. I didn't test it before, which I probably should have, but that's where we're at. So I don't know. Do you want to talk now? Hold on.
Yeah, well, just as we, when you do that, let me know when you're ready to test Mike again. And folks, I'll direct all of you, if you haven't already read the piece out now in the Winnipeg Free Press by Mike and Ken Wiebe, both contributing to it. It was a pretty extensive read. We got into it right when we got off the plane, I guess, when we got here to Vegas yesterday afternoon. Detailing not only, how this situation came about, which we've been discussing, but also the other parts of like where they do go from here and what a trade might look like for the Winnipeg Jets if McGroarty is gone. Now, I mean, I am of the opinion that you've put 2 years in. I mean, obviously you've had his rights for 2 years. You're halfway to the 4-year window. You're halfway to the 4-year window, at which point you'd lose the rights. Now, I don't think this, from everything that we're hearing right now, and I mean, Mike has said it, Ken has said it, we've seen Rod as well as The Athletic. I mean, this is all coming from somewhere that a trade is anywhere from imminent or likely to happen this week over the next couple days. And if that's the case, what are the Jets looking to bring back? For a team that is in quote unquote win now mode, I mean, it could be players that will help right now. I still do think that if McGroarty is traded, this isn't going to be for a veteran player with 2 years left on his contract. I think that it'll be a player of similar age range. Could it be a year or two older? A guy that's actually in the National Hockey League right now that has just cut his teeth potentially. I certainly feel that this will be a younger player under team control, at least as part of it. Now, we've also talked about Colby Barlow and all of this in the past. And then Barlow is a guy that, I mean, brings a lot of what Rutger McGroarty has brought, as far as the character. It was almost amazing being in Nashville and talking to Colby after he got picked, of what almost a clone of McGroarty he sounded like when he was speaking to the media about his level of excitement, about Winnipeg, the market, the hockey team, and all of that. So, I mean, maybe they've got another guy that, projects to be captain material down the way already in the mix, and maybe that can allow them to look elsewhere. I think certainly when you look at the makeup of the team right now and where the prospects are, the chance to potentially move this to the blue line for a player that could project to be a defenseman for the team for a long time could certainly be a good part of it. Where are we at? Do we want to get Mike back in here?
I don't know.
Well, there's no trade to announce. There's just a dog announcing his presence right now. We'll get this into the mixer.
You look at Colby. Trade, like he's just being moved on his own. I think you're probably right. You're looking at probably a similar type player. And, Ken Wiebe had a couple of interesting suggestions in our piece where he looked at, potential returns. One of them was a guy like Connor Geekie. If a team like Utah was interested in adding a Rutger McGroarty, and, they're obviously trying to establish a foothold in a new market. Now, like Rutger McGroarty could probably sell a lot of tickets in a place like Utah. You do wonder, though, we know the Jets would love to move like a Nate Schmidt type contract. Could Rutger McGroarty be attached to that? What's happening with Nikolai Ehlers? If you were to put McGroarty and Ehlers together, that really enhances the potential return. There's a lot of ways that this could go, and I think that's why there's so many rumors right now out there. The rumor mill is certainly churning at a rapid rate, and it may do so right up until the draft tomorrow night, because I think, we know the Jets don't have a first round pick. Would they like to get back into that first round? Possibly, yes. Is there a way to get back into that first round? You would assume there would be. But if the Jets are in win now mode, just getting back into the first round, they would get a very good prospect to kind of replace a very good prospect. That very good prospect they'd get in the first round is not going to help them this coming season, very likely. So, there's a lot of things to consider. We're not expecting to hear from Kevin Cheveldayoff till I believe he'll speak tomorrow afternoon, right where you guys are in Vegas. And, if nothing has gone down with McGroarty between now and then, I suspect it's going to be a very interesting line of questioning directed to Kevin Cheveldayoff. And I'll be very curious to hear what he has to say about all this.
Well, me too, Mike. And by the way, thanks to everybody in chat for kind of allowing giving the feedback for the any troubleshooting we need to do. It sounds like everything's good. Nice job, Remo, to make that happen. Listen, I'll be there. I would love, and maybe we're not going to really find this out, Mike, until after a deal is made.
Right.
But
exactly what happened, yeah.
To hear it from the horse's mouth as to how this thing went sideways is going to be fascinating. And hey, sometimes they'll give us the real goods. Sometimes things will be, everyone will be on a need-to-know basis, and they won't feel that everybody needs to know. But I do think it's important because, listen, I don't need to tell you. You've heard the feedback just like we have on the show. This was a collective kick in the nuts for the entire fan base on the weekend. Coming out of the Bomber game on Friday night where the team fell to 0-3, you wake up Saturday morning and check your social media feed, and everyone is talking about the first thing Elliot Friedman talked about on 32 Thoughts outside of the Stanley Cup final was this situation for Rutger McGroarty. And it was a kind of a slap in the face almost for people, because it just seemed to be so out of the blue. Now, I'm sure we'll find out that this maybe wasn't completely out of the blue for the Jets, and there was more other things. But I mean, that's going to be the first thing. And you wonder, for a team in the situation that the Winnipeg Jets are, how they handle this, as they've done beforehand with players that have wanted out, Jacob Trouba and others. You know, how they handle it and how they feel that affects them moving forward with other players that could be in similar situations, I think is obviously a concern of the fan base.
For sure. And, you know, I do wonder, Huss, you look at last year's draft, we'll see how this year plays out. Look at last year, the Jets had 5 picks. 4 of the 5 were Canadian Hockey League players. And the 5th was a USHL player, Zach Naring, who has family. His mother's from Manitoba, and he's from Minot, so he's practically a Canadian, and members of his family are Canadian. You know, I had a few people ask me, like, why do the Jets keep kind of going to this well? They're getting burned, talking about, you know, the Trouba and the Kopp and Roslovic. And while I think all circumstances are unique, the Jets certainly have hit on a couple big Americans in the guy that's probably going to get his second Vezina trophy tonight, and a guy that's already won a Lady Byng and is a perennial 40 goal scorer when he's healthy, and Kyle Connor. So Connor Hellebuck, Kyle Connor, those 2 Americans certainly worked out well for the Jets. I don't know that we're going to see a huge philosophical shift here, but I do wonder if the Jets are not, you know, knowing some of the challenges, and we're seeing this with American players. Like Rutger McGroarty's not the only one. Cutter Gauthier, who's a very good friend of Rutger McGroarty, he obviously did this, and that wasn't to a Canadian team. That was to the Philadelphia Flyers. We're seeing some of these U.S. college players. They know they have a lot more power, and they're exercising it in some cases. Do the Jets now kind of shift their mindset a little bit when it comes to drafting? Again, it was just 1 draft last year, but I thought that was kind of interesting. You know, I had someone connected to, I should say this. I got to know the McGroarty family quite well. They have not commented to me over the past week. You know, they're laying low, and I'm sure they've been told to do so. I have talked to some people connected to the inner circle, if you will, or part of that inner circle with McGroarty. And, you know, one person told me 3 teams to keep an eye on here when it came to potential new homes for Rutger McGroarty: Buffalo, Columbus, and the New York Islanders. Now, Columbus would make a lot of sense. Basically, two of McGroarty's, if not the 2 best friends that he has in hockey, in Gavin Brindley, who was his line mate last year, and Adam Fantilli, who was his teammate a year before. They both are property of Columbus. You know, the Islanders are interesting. They're a team that's been connected to Nikolai Ehlers, I think, a little bit. And again, we talk about potential package deals there. And Buffalo is a team with a lot of young players and prospects because they haven't been very good for a significant amount of time. Columbus is in a similar situation. So, you know, not saying that it's going to be one of those 3. Those are 3 teams to certainly keep an eye on here. And yeah, I'm very curious to what Kevin Cheveldayoff has to say. You know, we talked about his to-do list and all the things on it. I'm not sure that moving Rutger McGroarty was something, at least until maybe a couple weeks ago, that was an immediate item on that list. But it's certainly become, I think, a big priority, and certainly has the hockey world buzzing.
Well, I mean, Mike, the irony of this all is that let's go back to the trade deadline. And we were talking about what the Winnipeg Jets would be willing to give up to make this big push to add out the round out their roster heading into the playoffs. Yeah, our first round picks on the table, no problem. I think don't even talk about Rutger McGroarty, and yet here we are right now. So it is. I mean, listen, it's something that's dominated the chat, dominated the sports talk here in Winnipeg on our program and elsewhere for the last few days. And I can tell you that conversation here in Vegas is not limited to those of us that have connections to Winnipeg. A lot of people are talking about that as well. But that really, Mike, is just the start of it all. What's your read and what are you hearing on Nikolai Ehlers right now as we get closer to the first round beginning tomorrow night at the Sphere?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of chatter around Ehlers. There's no doubt there are teams that would love to have a player like him, who they see as an impact player, a difference maker. And for all of Nikolai Ehlers' knocks, like you look at his numbers, Huss, he's a very consistent producer. Now, some will say that you'd love that those consistent numbers to be a little higher than they are, rather than just a perennial 60-point guy. Why can't he be a 70 or an 80-point guy? And I think a lot of that comes down to usage and the feeling that he hasn't been used maybe the way other teams feel that they would use him. Again, I go back to Scott Arniel, and to me, that's the wild card in all this. And I'm fascinated, and I don't know the answer as to whether Scott Arniel getting the head coaching job, certainly all the things he said publicly about Nikolai Ehlers would actually have you think that's a player. It sure sounds like the Jets would love to hold on to him, because Scott Arniel envisions maybe some things with him that, going back to Rick Bowness and maybe even Paul Maurice at times did not. So I can't tell you as we sit here today what's going to happen with Nikolai Ehlers. I'll just reiterate what I think we've talked about in the past, which is there isn't the same urgency to me with the Ehlers situation unless you're using him because you're addressing some other significant hole in your roster that you feel you can fill. To me, the biggest questions right now is certainly the McGroarty situation. And I think with Dylan DeMello re-signing, that probably shuts the door on Brendan Dillon at this point, Huss. But I'm also really interested to see, the buyout window is now open. Nobody was put on waivers today. Teams have until Sunday. Nate Schmidt and or Neil Pionk, what is going to happen with those guys, if anything? And that is certainly something, that's where, again, a guy like McGroarty is interesting, because you wonder, could he be paired? Is he the sweetener, but where the return is actually something substantial as opposed to just a cap dump? It's a really interesting situation as you now look at the Jets cap situation, where they have needs. Certainly the Sean Monahan situation. I know Ken Wiebe yesterday in Vegas saying that there's certainly a lot of chatter that the Jets are taking another run at Monahan. Whether that leads to anything between now and Monday remains to be seen. But a lot of moving parts right now. And as always in the NHL, the salary cap is a big part of that. And I think when you look at what the Jets still have on the books now that they've given Dylan DeMello a $1.9 million raise, it certainly makes the Schmidt and Pionk contracts stand out significantly when you're talking about what they might be trying to move off the books. And I would even add in a guy like Alex Iafallo, Huss. We haven't really talked about Alex Iafallo. I like the player. Let's be honest, he's not really a $4 million player, especially how the Jets were using him towards the end of last season, often as a fourth liner. That's an expensive fourth liner. Could they find a taker for that contract, and what would it take? We're seeing teams like Vancouver right now, right? Obviously ahead of free agency, try to create some cap space. The Detroit Red Wings just made a trade the other day as well to do that. Will the Jets join the party? I got to think that's something they're very strongly considering here. And if they can't find a trade partner, we'll see if they exercise that buyout option on a guy like Nate Schmidt prior to Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they want to go down that road, they can. We kind of laid out a little earlier, what that would mean. I mean, a 2/3 buyout split over 2 years. You're going to gain $4 million of cap space. You're going to lose $2 million next year. Right. But as it pertains to the McGroarty, I know it was thrown out amongst a ton of possibilities in the article. I think it would be a huge mistake for the Jets to try to weaponize McGroarty to get some cap return right now. If this asset is traded, Mike, it needs to be in the best interest of the short and long term, and particularly long term, I would say, because he wasn't really even going to be in the mix. Certainly, if he was going to be, we wouldn't be in this situation right now.
Right.
Listen, if they're going to get a lesser return to get Nate Schmidt, for instance, included in the deal, to me, I think that would be a mistake. And I'll go on record right now. I would be stunned if that actually does take place. if you're talking about maybe taking on another contract or something in an Ehlers deal or something else, anything's possible. But as it pertains to the McGroarty asset right now, because it doesn't look like he's going to be a Jet in the future, I think they need to be, and I'm sure they are talking right now about other drafted players, other young players right now in the National Hockey League that will have significant team control as what would be coming back to make sense for the Winnipeg Jets to move on a guy that they thought could be a franchise cornerstone for many years.
Let me throw this out, Huss. How big now does Chaz Lucius's development path become? This is the Jets now, if you look back at first round picks here, that was something they were absolute money on, right? In terms of first round picks, guys becoming, core pieces of this roster. You look at the recent history, though, of first round picks. It's not so great. And now, again, Rucker McGroarty could turn out to be an excellent NHL player. It just looks like that's going to probably be with another organization, right? And so when you're talking about first rounders in recent years, that's something that I think the Jets, they need some guys to pan out. Now, Brad Lambert could certainly be that guy. He was the other first rounder with Rucker McGroarty in 2022. Colby Barlow certainly could be that guy, and you mentioned him. But Chaz Lucius, the 2021 first rounder, this is a guy who just has had injury after injury after injury, and he's played 17 games last year total, and certainly looked like he was coming on with the Moose. I saw recently he did an interview where he said he's going to be resuming skating shortly, and he hopes to be at full contact by the fall. But my goodness, what a big season this is coming up for him. Obviously, Cole Perfetti, first rounder in 2020, still finding his footing, and it looks like he took a big step last year and will get an even bigger step. Then you back up from there. I mean, Ville Heinola, 2019, still trying to work his way into the NHL. And Christian Vesalainen, 2017, that one didn't work out so well, right? Logan Stanley, 2016, along with Patrick Laine. The Jets just have not had those impact guys from the first round. Now they've got a few in the pipeline, but to me that makes a guy like Chaz Lucius and what happens with his development here almost it almost punctuates it in a way.
Listen, I mean, I don't know, I don't know where you're at, and and I'll say this is a perfect actually why not question of the day for not Autocorp, but Waverly and McGilvery in the chat. Like, where are you on Chaz Lucius? I mean, do you hold out much hope? I mean, for me, Mike, if Chaz Lucius can stay healthy enough, long enough to get games in the NHL and even have an opportunity to show what they had the glimpse of when they drafted, I honestly think that would be a bonus right now for the organization. I mean, this young man, unfortunately, has had basically the definition of Murphy's Law when it comes to luck at staying healthy right now. And I mean, the development, even though he's looked really good at times, certainly when he was in the junior the year before and when, with the Manitoba Moose, it's just that every single year something happens to him. And we're not talking about missing 20 games here. We're talking about barely able to get into 20 games of an 80-game season. And that's a very difficult way to get ready to move into the NHL. But again, stranger things have happened. Talent counts. And if that talent can actually get on the ice, I wouldn't rule it out. But that would be such a pleasant surprise, I think, for most people that followed the Jets and their prospects.
For sure. And you talk about games played, Huss. He played all of 17 last year. The year before that, 18, 12 with the Moose, 6 in the Western Hockey League before he got injured. He's played 35 hockey games over the last 2 years as a 21-year-old. That's since coming out of the University of Minnesota, where he only played 24 games, also because of injury in the 21-22 season. He's played 59 hockey games over the last 3 years. That is not a lot, and that's not what you want from a young player that's on a development path. That this becomes such a big year for him. He'll obviously start with the Manitoba Moose, and the hope would be that he can stay healthy, stay in that lineup, and be an impact player.
Mike, the other name I have to bring up with you that a month ago, I wouldn't even go there. But I have heard the name Patrick Laine.
Yes.
Mentioned associated with the Winnipeg Jets from more than one person. Have you heard anything on this? I mean, where are you at right now? Because that would be, I'll tell you what, it would be a reunion that I think the vast majority of Jet fans would absolutely love. I did say that when he went into the program and then when we heard that he was looking for a trade, I did say that, this is a place that he knows and had great success at. And I think there's reason to believe that maybe there are some reasons why it would make sense for somewhat of a reunion. But I just said, okay, but we're not talking about it anymore because there's no way it happens. And yet I keep hearing his name and the Winnipeg Jets mentioned together.
Yeah, it's those rumors are certainly out there. And, I have it on fairly good authority that he still holds Winnipeg in extremely high regard.
I do too.
And when he's obviously had a really rough go of it, both professionally and more importantly, us personally. Like he's had a hellish few years here, and just think about in your own life, right? Just for people, if things aren't going well, what do you think back to when things were going well? And I think maybe not the end of his tenure in Winnipeg, but certainly, you look at the highlights of his career, and Winnipeg would be all over that. And there's a lot of, it's a very different situation in Winnipeg now than obviously what he left. There's a lot of people that are no longer in that room that were maybe issues when he was here. And let's face it, I mean, you walk around, you're there all the time, Huss, during Jets games. You walk around Canada Life Center. The two jerseys that I still see the most of non-current roster players are Dustin Byfuglien and Patrick Laine. He's beloved, and for a team like the Jets, hey, you're trying to find you're trying to reconnect with the community. Imagine what a Patrick Laine reunion would do in terms of ticket sales and merch sales and all that.
Well,
that being said,
Mike, especially if it was. I mean, if part of the reason why Laine would be coming back is that that's where he wants to go. I mean, that matters. Yeah. That matters in this market. And just on top of it, I had a conversation earlier yesterday on this topic with somebody here in Vegas. And I said, the guy that should be pounding the table the most if in these Jets meetings that'll be taking place over these few days leading into the draft might be Davis Payne, a guy that might have no connection with them. Because I tell you what, the second 29 is back in town, that power play looks better immediately. I think we can all agree on that.
We certainly can, Huss. Now, what I mentioned McGroarty and Columbus and how that certainly would make a lot of sense. And I had, as I say, someone connected to this situation told me to keep an eye on Columbus and Buffalo and the Islanders. But, you look at that, at the Laine situation, like he's signed for 2 more years at, I believe it's 8.6, 8.5, sorry, 8.7. So that's a lot of contract to take on. I would assume there'd have to be some kind of retention there. But again, you're talking about, could the Jets move a Nate Schmidt as part of that? Basically send one contract one way and take on another. I don't know. There's definitely some smoke there. I'm not going to go so far as to say there's a full-blown fire at this point. There is some smoke for sure. Some smoke signals, if you will, in the air. And it's another very intriguing situation among a long list of them to keep an eye on here in the coming days.
Well, if that were to happen while we were here, that would be on a level. I mean, like the Dubois trade last year was huge. It spiked the show. Everyone was talking about it, but we knew that it was coming.
Right.
This, I think, would catch a lot of people off guard if it happened, but I think there'd be a lot of people that would be pretty excited about it. And listen, I mean, I think if the Jets were willing to and they were able to handle and bring that contract in, mean, that's one of the biggest things right now is the fact that, he's on the books for 8-7 for 2 more years, which is very difficult for a lot of teams to bring on. But if there's a way to make that work, it would be a redemption story that I would sign up for. I'll tell you that much. And it would be a heck of a lot of fun. Hey, we got to get out because Grant.
By the way, just to leave you with this, who's Patrick Laine's best friend still in all of hockey? That's one Nikolai Ehlers. And you wonder how one situation could impact another there, right? When you're talking about hypotheticals. And I know because I talked to Nikolai Ehlers earlier this season about Patrick Laine. They literally still talk every day. They remain extremely close. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but should be an interesting few days here, Huss.
No doubt about it. Of course, folks, keep your eyes on the Winnipeg Free Press. Read the article from Mike and Ken that is out right now, and I imagine there'll be plenty more coming through the weekend. Ken's going to join us tomorrow on the show here in Vegas, and that Mike will be all over it as well. Mike, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate you as always, my friend.
Thanks. Enjoy your time in the Sin City.
We certainly will. We're going to get to what everyone is here for, and that is the draft coming up with our pal Grant McCagg. Just before we bring in Grant, a huge thanks to our friends at Princess Auto for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And don't forget, Monday, July 1st is the big Canada Day spectacular celebration down at Princess Auto Stadium. Gets going at noon. I believe all the tickets are gone for the grandstand for the concerts, but you get down there early, tailgate area, inflatables, everything going on. I mean, with food trucks, it'll be such a fun place to bring the family down as well for it. And again, fireworks lighting up the sky at dusk. That is Monday, so make a plan to take in the Canada Day celebrations at Princess Auto Stadium. Of course, you can visit Princess Auto on Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. And speaking of Princess Auto Stadium, they're going to be replenishing the Canadian club stock after what Bomber fans did to it last Friday night in that game against the BC Lions. What an incredible summer night and evening, everything other than the final score. Bombers, of course, heading to Calgary on the weekend, looking to avoid going 0-4. Huge game coming up for Winnipeg. But when you think of the Blue Bombers and you think of games, many people do think of Canadian Club because they're the official spear of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, available throughout Princess Auto Stadium, including on Canada Day for those of you celebrating. And you can pick up CC and Ginger available at games as well, and your local beer vendors, and all the great Canadian Club family of products available today at your local Manitoba liquor marts. Need a fence, gang? You know where to go. Wallace & Wallace, the experts in fencing and overhead doors since 1946. Got pretty much every single kind of fence you could possibly need, and the experts that have been doing it better than anyone in this market for just about 7 decades. If you do need a new fence or an overhead door, best selection in town, by the way, give them a phone call, and 452-2700. They'll set you up with the time to pop in for a free consultation, a little bit of a quote, and then get the best in the business, work on that new fence so you can enjoy the summer and not be spending all that time working in the backyard, just enjoying it when it's done. You can also visit them online, wallacefences.com. Check out their showroom on Lawson Road, just off of Kenaston. And hey, we're going to be seeing a lot of nice looks and suits here in Vegas at the draft tomorrow by all the draftees. If you are in the need to up your menswear game, fellas, get down to F Apparel, 190 Smith Street downtown. Custom suits beginning at $400. Chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an amazing selection of menswear accessories. 15% discount for wedding parties. If you and the fellas need suits for the big day that you can wear far beyond, it's definitely the place to go. Make an appointment. Find out more online at that's EPHapparel.com, or pop down and see them at 190 Smith Street downtown. All right. Well, we're obsessing over potential Jets moves, but it's a big day tomorrow, round 1, right here in Vegas at the Sphere, and we cannot have a draft week of shows without welcoming in one of our favorite draft experts, Grant McCagg from Recrutes.ca. The draft guide is out right now, and Grant joins us on the program. Grant, what's going on? How are you?
Hey, when you said speaking of princesses, I thought you were going to introduce me there, and I was getting a little worried. But
you're a king.
Yeah.
You're a king when it comes to the draft stuff. How are you feeling about this class coming forward? This is the Macklin Celebrini draft, but 31 teams are not getting Macklin Celebrini. Big picture, compared to other years, what do you make of the strength of the class of 2024?
Well, it's a good Canadian crop this year. I think it's very strong with Canadian content. Fairly weak in Europe. So I don't know that I wouldn't call it a really deep draft. I think the top 12 or so is high quality, and it's a good at the very top. So it's a good year to have a lottery pick, I think is fair to say. But because it's pretty weak in Europe and not that strong or deep in the U.S., I wouldn't call it one of the deeper drafts in recent years.
Grant, I really enjoyed the draft package, and right off the bat, you have an article called "Teams Need More Forward Thinking," and it is very important to talk about this right now because you're looking at a lot of mocks, looking at the top prospects after Macklin Celebrini. It's a glut of defensemen, and it was amazing read. I'm going through all of these draft classes for the last 20 years of the top defensemen picked, and it seems like it's a far more inexact science projecting 18-year-old defensemen than 18-year-old forwards.
Yeah, and some even 17 when they're drafted. It's I think because it's typically a longer development path, and you don't the team that drafts a defenseman doesn't necessarily get to develop them for the first 2 or 3 years or more. If he goes the college route, it might be 3 or 4 years before they get their hands on him. So it's inexact even with forwards, but I think it's even riskier with the defenseman because when you look at that article, like I listed the top 6 defensemen taken in each draft from 2000 to 2019, and man, there were a pile of misses. So it's odds are that 3 of the touted 6 are not going to end up being as good as people kind of think right now. And I guess the trick is to find the right 3.
Grant, I'm looking back, at some of the defensemen, from a decade ago or more. And listen, there's a lot of good players that are still in the National Hockey League, but you wonder, were they worth picking where they were? I will say this, it seems to have changed a little bit in the last sort of 6-7 years. I mean, listen, the Ulya Levy pick in 2016, which haunted and still haunts the Canucks to this day, I'm sure, was a real issue. But, after that, you've got Sergachev at 9, Jake Bean at 13, not so good, McAvoy and Chychrun at 15, 16. But then I look at 2017 with Heiskanen and Makar, Rasmus Dahlin, who went first overall. Are the teams getting better at it? 28-19, Byram, and of course Moritz Seider was a great pick by Detroit. Are they getting better at it at least?
I think so. They seem to be getting away from being too in love with the big defensemen. Like you look back at the drafts where a lot of the defensemen busted. They were typically big, and I think the game has been evolving a bit where you need that mobility in the puck moving on the fence, and you got a mobile, smart puck moving defenseman. Odds are that he's going to succeed at the NHL level now. And I mean, McCagg, Bolin, and Heiskanen were pretty much can't miss. I don't think it was genius moves by any means to be drafting those guys high.
Grant McCagg's with us. Recrutes.ca will fill you in on how you can be the smartest guy at your draft party with the Recruits Draft Guide in a minute. This Ivan Demidov, who you have number 2 after Macklin Celebrini, I've been watching, tape of him, and I mean, he is a dynamic player. But again, he was in the MHL, which is essentially Russian junior hockey. How rare is it a guy to not be in the KHL or the VHL to be at this point? And I mean, just your thoughts on him, obviously quite high as you have him as your number 2 prospect.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the MHL is pretty decent hockey, Certainly in the playoffs, a lot of really good, a lot of high draft picks going to be former picks and ones that are going to be picked high were playing in it. Like, Saleyev went back to the MHL for the playoffs, and so did Artemanov, who's going to be probably a top 40 pick. There were a lot of top 60 picks that were playing in the playoffs. So it's pretty good hockey, but in my estimation, SKA is a little different. They don't play the young guys too often. Like even Michkov got shipped off, loaned out to another club for 2 years. Michkov, in my opinion, in the preseason was perhaps their best player. But then he hurt his knee, and they decided to keep him down with the junior club all year. But he completely dominated. He could have been in the KHL without question, I think.
After Demidov, well, let me ask you this, because as I mentioned, many of the picks. I mean, a guy like Bob McKenzie that just evaluates what the scouts are telling him as to where the NHL team's heads are at. You look at a lot of lists, and there's a big run of defensemen after Macklin Celebrini. The recruits list is different. Tell us about that and why you've got guys like Demidov and Beckett Seneke from the Oshawa Generals, and then Caden Lindstrom from the Medicine Hat Tigers, all forwards higher on the list than the rest of those defensemen that we have heard many teams have higher on their list, or at least other scouts.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, it's one of those years, and I think Bob brought it up, where it's you talk to a different scout, like 2 different scouts, and one will almost have his list reverse of what the other one does. I deal with about a half dozen scouts, and most of them aren't as high on the defenseman as a lot of these public lists. So I think you may be surprised at how many forwards go in the top 8. I think it'll be more than many people are thinking.
Hey, Grant, for the guys that you talk to, if you're a Canadian team, and I mean, I'm thinking of the Winnipeg Jets, but we could add the Habs and the Sens, maybe not the Leafs, just because of how much money they have and the machine that that organization is at MLSE. But are you hearing any concerns? And we're talking all about this Rucker McGroarty situation and how things have soured, and apparently he is likely to be dealt from most people that we're hearing from. Are we hearing more for these Canadian teams? Are they more concerned about Russians with the uncertainty about Russian players, or Americans that will be playing NCAA that might not sign? And might we be seeing a trend for a team like the Jets that has been consistently taking the guy they think that's best player overall, that has often been an American, maybe to start picking a little closer to home?
Yeah, well, there haven't been that many examples. I mean, that's what Adam Fox a few years back with Calgary, I guess, was one. But, I don't think it's happening all the time. So I'd be a little careful about that. Montreal, I don't think has ever drafted a college player that didn't sign with the team. So I don't see them saying, "Wow, McGroarty." And I mean, is it all because it's a Canadian team that he's not signing? Like, I don't know all the details of that, but
No, I don't think that it is at all. I mean, it's
Right.
it's more that he,
Right.
unlike some of his teammates that got drafted by very early in the first round by terrible teams that don't have rosters that were competing for playoffs. It's pretty easy for them to come in, and it sort of sounded a little bit sideways. But I do think that. Well, I would be surprised that there isn't more of a trend of the Jets to maybe be looking at some more Canadian talent. And often we've thought that might be something that could actually help the team. The Western Hockey League is a place that, listen, we are in the West and, no longer have the ice, but the Brandon Wheat Kings down the road. So a little bit more. I want to ask you about two WHL prospects that look to have their names called early in the first round, probably in the top 10. Caden Lindstrom from the Medicine Hat Tigers, who's the second center on the board, bigger than Macklin Celebrini. You have him at 4. And then we'll get into the rise this season of the son of Jerome, Tigga Ginla, who is, I've heard, you have him at 7. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the picks go off the board, if he might even get picked higher than that. But tell us about the top Western leaguers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you can add Cat into that group. Obviously, he had just a terrific year, 116 points. It's just a size that I think may scare teams off in the top 10, but he's a heck of a prospect too. But Caden Lindstrom, those 6'3" centers with top 2 upside don't come along very often. And he certainly got that. He was almost a goal a game this year and really jumped out of the gates. And it's too bad that he got injured there and may have some back issues. So I don't know if that'll harm him at the draft or not. Maybe he drops a couple places because of that. But typically a 6'3" center with his kind of upside and production, you're looking at a top 5 pick all day, But it's a testament to the strength of the top of this draft where it's possible that he doesn't go top 5. Tej, I loved him all year. He's considered a riser for sure. I mean, going into the year, it's because he played in Seattle last year and they were so strong and had so many veterans and he didn't really have a role. And then he didn't get invited to Helenka because he was a spare player basically on Kelowna last year, on Seattle last year, but he got the full opportunity. And from day one, he was fantastic this year. Just kept going up and up and up on my list. And by Christmas time, I had him in the top 10. And then eventually, most people did. And he's seen as a riser because of that. But I've liked him pretty much from day one this year. He's a sniper. And, I mean, the pedigree, you can't help but love. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about McGroarty there too, because I do also cover the Montreal Canadiens. And, there's been some talk that maybe there's a deal to be made there with the Canadiens when it comes to McGroarty.
Yeah, well, I mean, every time we hear this, and Habs fans, and this goes back to the Dubois days, Grant, it's like, oh, we'll give you some bad contract and a 3rd-round pick for a forward. I mean, it doesn't seem like any of these rumored trade options would make any sense for the team trading the player. But listen, just as a player, I mean, I know you're paying attention to the NCAA and looking at the players that are draft eligible, but I mean, what are your thoughts on McGroarty, his NHL readiness right now, and how he projects to, and how interested NHL teams should be and how willing they should be to part with significant assets to get this young man?
Yeah. Well, he's a character kid. I mean, he was... That's
what we thought.
Yeah, wore that letter for the U.S. development team and all that. But, like on the ice, at least he's a character kid, Yeah. He plays a he's a winner, I think, and scores goals, good size. He's attractive. I think, like Montreal has that, that Winnipeg pick that they may want back. And, if they can entice the deal with, I don't know, they've got a bunch of left defensemen, and I'm not exactly sure of what the depth chart looks like in Winnipeg right now, but usually, a team's not averse to picking up a good young defense prospect or two as well. So I don't know if that would entice them enough, but I think Montreal was probably at least exploring it, because I think they would like to add at least two pieces coming out of this draft that are either top six players or have the potential to be top six forwards. So I would think that Rutger has that upside, second line upside. So what's this about Line A? I only caught the end of that. Is that?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of smoke around the fact that, we know that Patrick Laine and Columbus are looking for a fresh start for him. And, from talking to a number of people, the word is that Patrick Laine loved his time in Winnipeg, and I think looks back at, the success that he had here, the comfort he had in the market, as maybe a great place for him to get his career back on track. And listen, there's a lot that goes into that. Obviously bringing on a contract of that size, what comes back the other way. But listen, the minute you mention that around here, a lot of people get like, wait a second, what? Because I think everyone thought that was long. That ship had long since sailed. And listen, there's a good chance that it has, but it's certainly something that we're going to talk about if other people are here, and we'll see how it goes. Hey, back to the Habs for a minute. Because the one thing that we're finding out is maybe the most important thing to have when you're putting together a roster that can compete, with the elite in the National Hockey League, is solid blue liners, especially on the right side. You were very high on Reinbacher. How has he progressed right now? And does he project to kind of be in the mix for a spot next year with the Habs? And I also wanted to ask you about Caden Gooley, because he's a player I know the Winnipeg Jets loved before, and had talked about. We'd been talking about Dubois potentially trades. That was a name that came out on a want list for a while. Where are those players right now? And are both of them untouchable for the Habs, considering where they are in their development and the look ahead for Kent Hughes and his club?
So McGroarty for Gooley, is that what you're?
Those are interesting sort of players that would be, I think, would be. How did he do, by the way, this year? I know he was playing. Did he progress as the organization wanted him? Like, when these guys are making their conversations in real time right now, where is Gooley as an asset and as an NHLer? And then what about Reinbacher as well?
Yeah. Well, you know full well, 21-year-old defenseman. It's a process, right? They don't often jump in and just dominate, but Gooley played first line minutes most of the time. When he ran into some injury problems, so I don't think you can get a full report on his progress because of that. But yeah, he made some strides, and he's like, there's a lot of upside there, and at worst he looks like a top 3 defenseman and likely a first pairing guy if it all comes together. So he's right on track. I think next year will be, you'll see him making another step. He still needs to add a little bit of muscle, and he mentioned that was his goal in this offseason, is to add a little more, because he got rocked a few times. He can hit, but when you got big forwards coming in, forechecking at the NHL level and creaming you, and you're maybe 10 pounds lighter than you probably ultimately are going to be, you're gonna get knocked down. You're gonna get rocked around a bit. So I I think it's just a question of him adding a little more muscle, and we'll see him make the next step where he becomes a bona fide top 3 NHL defenseman and perhaps first pairing.
You are listening and viewing Winnipeg Sports Talk live from the NHL Draft, presented by Coolbet. We're talking to Grant McCagg from Recrutes.ca. Always one of our favorite conversations heading into the draft. Grant, I'm really loving the Recrutes.ca draft guide. Just before we go, give all you and your team's hard work a plug and how people can pick it up as we get into the weekend.
Well, go to our website, RECRUTES, recruits.ca, and you'll see the cover of the draft guide right there on the homepage, and click on it, and you'll get directed to where you want to go. Yeah, right there. And then you just click on the subscribe and it'll take you right to the subscription page. And $14.99, we're keeping the price $5 off. I'm going to keep it off right till draft day, so keeping the price lower this year. I guess you asked me twice about Reinbacher, and maybe I better say something there. I didn't answer it just quickly. Teenage defenseman playing pro hockey in Switzerland on a really poor team that almost got relegated. He had an injury as well. He didn't, he didn't light up the house or anything like that this past year, but he was solid, and he came to Laval and didn't look out of place at all. So he's not going to make the Canadians out of camp, I don't think. And that's not the plan. They're going to give him at least a year, I think, in the minors and let him progress. And there's no rush because there's a pretty good young group of defensemen with the Canadians right now.
Grant, thanks so much for the time. Enjoy the draft. And I know, folks, by the way, give Grant a follow on Twitter. And I know he and the fellas out in Montreal are going to be diving in over with our pal Tony on the Sick podcast with a big draft preview as well. So if you're starving for more draft talk and draft coverage, the guys will have that coming up heading into it as well. Grant, thanks so much for the time. All the best and enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, Andrew.
Good stuff. There is Grant McCagg. Always love having Grant on the program. And, and the thing that I love, and I think this list, again, shows what we're hearing from so many, that from team to team, from scout to scout, after Mac Celebrini at number 1, there is a lot of difference of opinion, shall we say. But Grant's the one guy that, when you look at this final list from Recruits, far more forward heavy at the top as opposed to others where it can go from Celebrini and then 3, 4, 5 deep of defensemen before you get to another forward. We're going to talk more draft actually and see what the Coolbet fellas have kicking over at Coolbet for draft props. I got a couple in before I got on the plane. We'll talk about that in a minute, but got to shout out our friends over at Little Brown Jug. Today's pod sponsored in part by Generic Lager, your basic lager, just better. Little Brown Jug made the taste you crave with the name that says it all. With this impressively standard lager, whether you're at a game or watching from home, grab a cold one and cheers. Grab it at Little Brown Jug in the Exchange District at 336 William Avenue, at your local LC or vendor, or now available at all your sporting events. And by the way, check out that Little Brown Jug patio when you've got some time. Long weekend coming up. Maybe you pop in for a couple in the afternoon, grab a rack or two, or if you are heading out camping, I mean, definitely, may I suggest, a rack of some generics for you and your friends. Hey, another great place to have Little Brown Jug and all of Winnipeg's famous local beers is the Beer Can, the most beautiful outdoor beer garden and bar in the city, just next door to the Granite Curling Club at the end of the Osborne Bridge. Not only do they have the best selection of local beers available for you, some other great new drinks, including some frozen drinks this year that people have been loving. They've also got some incredible food from the evil geniuses behind Cosmos Food Cantina, Space Food Cantina, who also do the food down at Next Door at 116 Sherbrooke. And, of course, the world-famous sandwiches down at Hoagie Boys on South Osborne. Again, this weekend, if you're not getting out of town, make a point of heading down and taking part in one of those great summer traditions in the city coming out of the pandemic, the beer can at One Granite Way. Royal Sports is another good stop before the weekend. Now, of course, you can we'll be getting the draft caps and all that stuff coming in. We're actually going to go and get a look at the new jerseys tomorrow with the little thing that Fanatics is putting on. I know I've been a little critical of Fanatics. Hopefully they've got their act together after the Major League Baseball fiasco. But a bunch of new looks of teams. We're going to check that out. And listen, when it comes to new jerseys and whatnot, there's only one place in Winnipeg for that. That's Royal Sports. But the reason I bring up the weekend, they've got this incredible selection of the best Yeti products, coolers, mugs, everything that you need from Yeti over on the King Skate, Snow, and Surf side. And then, water, toys, frisbees, ring, the rings that you throw forever. Just fun stuff to make the most of summer, not to mention soccer, softball, baseball, tennis, running, great selection of bikes. It's all there at Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Winnipeg for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And hey, we're getting into Week 4 of the Canadian Football League. Saturday night, if you're in town, the place to be for the Bomber game is Boston Pizza. Tonight, we've got the Elks and British Columbia Lions kicking off the week. I know the playoffs are over, but summer's here. But 24/7, 365, Boston Pizza is the place to get together with your friends for the big game. The world-famous BP wings, ice-cold schooners, gourmet pizzas. And hey, if you are staying at home tonight, you can always get the great taste of Boston Pizza by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. We're going to, I'm really looking forward to this next segment. Now, for those of you who are regular Lock Shop watchers, I've got to thank Patty and Jake and the guys for jumping in for me yesterday with an unplanned, not necessarily unexcused absence as we were planes, trains, and automobiles to get here. But I love draft props, and we've got a bunch at Coolbet right now. And just before we bring in our pal Jake Bolin Moss, got a quick little spot from our pal Taylor Pendrith, who's going at it at the Rocket Mortgage right now. A couple of his best finishes so far in the PGA Tour have been that. Taylor Pendrith, part of Team Coolbet. And let's get that and then bring in JBM to see what we can wager on for the draft on the weekend. All right, let's bring in Jake Bolin Moss from Coolbet, my running mate back at the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. Not necessarily a full-time soccer guy, but we got to be soccer guys right now with Canada with their big win in the Copa. Jake, what's going on, man? Great to have you back on the program. How are you? You're muted. Hold on one sec. Working through a couple of audio issues. Now, welcome to the program. What's up, buddy? How are you?
Boys, it's draft week. It's all good. Like, these things are going to happen. We're just ironing out the kinks. I think we got to work on the commercial, too. I didn't hear any sound, but I'm sure we'll get it going here. Listen, tough to throw that on you guys as you're battling through all this travel. There's a lot of talk yesterday. People can't believe that Remis has never had a flight canceled before. I don't think I've ever had a flight canceled, so I'm in the same boat. I guess now he has had a flight canceled, so he's experienced that. Yeah, listen, a lot going on, especially for you guys. I'm excited to be on the program. Chat a little draft with you.
I'll say this: I've definitely had delays, but I've never had to go home and do the walk of shame, like picking your bags back from from the thing. That was ridiculous. Like, it was such. We went through customs to the U.S. and we had to go back through customs to Canada, and the border guard is like, "You buy any duty free while you were there?" And I'm like, it took me a second. I thought he was joking. That was a real question. So, look, it was, I never got my bags loaded, checked in, and then had to go home. Usually when I go to the airport, I arrive at my destination or some destination that's not my own bed. So that was what happened on Wednesday.
Yeah, it was something else. And the funny thing is, we got here. That was what's important. Obviously, Coolbet presenting all of our draft shows and draft content. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to crank this out right through the draft. I've just found out, I was completely oblivious to this. We're flying WestJet home. WestJet apparently is going on strike tomorrow. So,
it's not good.
So listen, this could be just the start of an odyssey that we will always remember. But for the meantime, we'll just do our thing and make the best of it. But certainly, we've got a great setup here. We cannot wait for the draft tomorrow. And as I mentioned, Jake, in addition to the excitement we've got with Canada soccer, what's happening with the Euro now that we're down to the round of 16, huge week in the Canadian Football League beginning tonight with BC and Edmonton going at it. Coolbet's got some great draft props, and in between delays, I spent plenty of time going over everything right now. And as we just spoke with Grant McCagg, what's so interesting about these is that, with the exception of Macklin Celebrini, who is a lock to go number one, the Sharks have basically already told everyone that they're picking him. There's a lot of differing opinions on who goes next, and it makes for some pretty fun little wagering options that you and the fellas have up on the board.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the disclaimer. I'm going to botch some of these names. I was just looking at the board, and I'm like, I should have prepped some of these names because there's no way I'm going to be able to say Artyom Levshinov. So
good. You did very well on that.
Yeah, not bad on that one. Eh? Second overall pick. He is the top right now. If we do want to talk about, who's next, minus 333. So a fair favorite. If we're talking about who's going to go next, the guy who did put these together, I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain and the folks at WST. Our guy J-Rock, he's incredible when it comes to prospects. He's incredible when it comes to the OHL, especially. He actually he's limited basically everywhere when it comes to betting on the OHL, wherever you can bet the OHL. One of the best, and he's telling us about this. I remember him telling this whole story about how much he bets the OHL and how well he knows it, and you'd be shocked to listen to this guy talk about the OHL. So I just want to shout out J-Rock, who put together all our draft props, which I know we're going to dive into.
Well, listen, I don't even know how you might make, but how difficult is it for these guys to put these lists together where you can actually wager real, legitimate Canadian dollars on, considering so many of these discussions behind closed doors, different teams have different opinions. Every scout tells us that, once you get past Celebrini, different teams are having different guys on it. There's a lot of risk that goes involved when you're taking the bets.
Well, listen, I don't think any team is trading out of the top five. We have odds for second, third, fourth, and fifth overall. With a ton of players on the board, I don't think any team would be trading out. But how does that go into consideration as well? Because needs for certain teams differ when you move down the board, right? Obviously, we have San Jose off the top. I know, I think Anaheim's making the third pick. Who's in between? Chicago maybe making the second pick? I can't exactly remember. I should have obviously been a little more prepped with my draft order. But, obviously it all depends on needs, right? So it's an interesting thing. I don't think any team will be trading out of the top five. I think, teams want the guys up at the top of that list. But like you said, it's one of those drafts where there's not a definitive number 2, number 3 guy after Celebrini goes off the board with the Sharks.
No, for sure. And, I'm looking at, we'll get to some of the over-unders with this in a minute. But, as far as, it's so great. The odds are working for me right now. Second overall pick, as you mentioned, Artem Levshinov. And Levshinov, this is hilarious. Like, we just had Grant McCagg on the recruits list. He's 11th in this. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensemen ahead of him. He's been playing at Michigan State, so I think that they have a better, but the scouts, at least North America, know him better than the others. But there are all sorts of talented defensemen that are available right now in there. And again, he was a little bit higher on some of the forwards. That's the guy that he has at number 2. If a team like the Blackhawks decide that they're not sure on these defensemen, Ivan Demidov right now, and he's number 2 on this list. I see him at plus 185. I think that's fluctuated a little bit, but he's been below plus 200 for the last little while. But really, I mean, as far as the odds, it's one of those 2 guys right now, because anybody else starts at 35 to 1 or more.
Yeah, listen, I'll be honest with you, folks. If you're going to bet the draft, I'd more than likely stay away from a 35 to 1, as the 3rd highest odds on the board. So you look at that second overall pick. It's Levchinov and then Demidov. Your best value is Demidov, right? And if that's the guy Chicago feels they need over a Levchinov, then that's where they could go. And you're getting a 2-to-1 number right now. I'm seeing actually 2-to-1 on my end. So I don't know. Maybe we're just
okay. You know what?
Different feed. But
I pulled this up. So that's probably moved a little bit over the last little bit. I got it up, and then I just didn't touch it because I thought I would get geo-blocked, and I was just so happy to be able to actually get the odds up on my phone. So crazy things when you're in Nevada when it comes to sites as well. But what's fascinating about this is Levchinov is minus 303. If he doesn't go second, he's only the 3rd choice for the 3rd overall pick, and I guess that makes sense because they assume that he's going ahead of it. But Anton Silyev, it was plus 160. Bennett Seneke plus 325. And then Demidov is actually at 5 to 1 here. So it seems like Demidov's either going to get picked second, or we might see him fall down 4th, 5th, 6th, 5th, 6th or so. There's a couple of Canadian guys that are very intriguing to me. And Caden Lindstrom, who we talked about, he's the center from the Medicine Hat Tigers. He's 14 to 1 to go 3rd. I've seen a bunch of mocks that have him as the 5th pick in the draft. And that is also available. I'm just looking at 5th pick. He's at plus 230 right now. Demidov, as we just mentioned, who could potentially even go a second, he's at plus 170. And then the other name, and again, I won't get you to evaluate this. I'm just going to tell people this Bennett Seneke is number 3 on Grant McCagg's list. Right winger from the Oshawa Generals, just about 6'3". He is plus 300 for the 5th overall pick, plus 650 for the 4th overall pick, and at 3rd, plus 325. So it sounds like a very good chance that he ends up going in the top 5. I'm not sure that Caden Lindstrom gets past 5, and I'm pretty sure I put a little sprinkle on him as the 5th pick, which is there right now at plus 230. But, Jake, here's something we can get into. The number 1 overall pick is Macklin Celebrini. And this is my favorite prop. It is the first person the number 1 overall pick hugs at the NHL draft. And I think that this is moved. Do you have the lines there for this one in front of you?
I do.
Okay, give me the ones what it is right now on the site.
All right, I'll read it out again. So it's first person, the first overall pick hugs at the NHL draft. So it's Macklin Celebrini. We know that already. So this is the first person he'll hug. He's got mother plus 110. That's the top odds there. Father at plus 150. Sibling at plus 300. Partner at 12 to 1. So like a girlfriend. Grandparent 40 to 1. Teammate 40 to 1. Uncle, aunt 40 to 1. And then coach 75 to 1. I mean, I think we're looking. I assume I know where you're going, Huss. It's got to be one of those top 3 there.
Yeah. It would be a shock if it was any other. And I'll be honest, I haven't done enough digging. I have no idea if he even has a girlfriend, if she's there with him, what the story is. But it's probably going to end up being mom or dad. And listen, mom, I think, is going to be the chalk bet, plus 110. Father's actually come down a little bit. I think it was plus 120 before I left, and now it's at plus 150. I think there's value on the dad. And I will tell you why. Macklin Celebrini's father is the strength and conditioning coach for the Golden State Warriors. And it has been very clear all through his draft journey that his dad has been, incredibly formative in him as an athlete. And I think the fact that he's so involved in pro sports, a champion of his own with Golden State, I just have a feeling that he might be the guy that will be closest to him, that'll be going through him. Like, it's going to be, the mom and dad are going to be there, and they're both getting the hugs right away. I don't know if they do a group hug, how the book rates those bets, if it's a push, if it's whatnot. But I normally I would just say, well, guys are going to hug their mom first and then do their dad. I kind of got a feeling that there might be some value on the dad right now over mom, just because of the relationship between the son and the dad and that journey that they got there. I could be completely wrong, but it's a fun thing to throw $10 on or something like that. And then the real suspense is not when they call Macklin Celebrini's name. It's that camera shot right away. It's to see who gets the first hug.
Well, and that's the whole thing, right? We already know Celebrini's going first, so there's not even odds up for him to go first because there's no point. But if you want to get a piece of that first overall pick, that's what you're looking at right now. So like I said, it's probably mother or father. That's what the odds are stating. And, it might be a matter of who's on their feet first, Huss. He's getting up.
Great call.
If the dad gets up first, he might be turning to the dad for a hug as his mom's still getting up. You never really know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
The dad's a strength and conditioning coach, and he'll be so jacked. He might be the guy first up. That might go as well. Anyways, I'm going to put 10 on the father, and we will see what happens. Hey, listen, tomorrow you and I are going to be getting into the lock shop before we go live here with Winnipeg Sports Talk from the draft presented by Coolbet. I'm looking forward to talking a little CFL with you, and we may have to revert back into our Qatar soccer guy mode.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got round of 16 matchups in the Euro. We've got a big matchup, one of the biggest matchups in the Canadian men's program's history against Chile on the weekend. And, of course, a whole bunch of CFL action, which begins tonight. Just before we go, and people in the lock shop know this well, but there's a lot of cool bettors in the WST world that might not always see us there. Fill people in on the CFL promo every single week, the 20% win bonus, because that is available to go tonight if you've got a strong lean on this Elks-Lions game, or you can save it for the Bombers or any of the other games every single week at Coolbet.
Yeah, so if you're betting the CFL at Coolbet, or you want to bet the CFL at Coolbet, super simple. There's no opt-in required for this campaign. So you go over to the CFL page, you pick your favorite bet of the week. I think you can even do parlays as well. So, say you want to ride with, say you like the Alouettes and Bombers this weekend, just for argument's sake, plus 142. If you scroll down in your bet slip there, you'll see a 20% multiplier. So it's there automatically. You don't have to opt in, nothing like that. All you'll do is click apply, and then that gets added to your slip. So whatever you'd want to bet, say you were betting, $10 on that parlay, Alouettes Bombers, it's going to return $14, just over $14, plus a couple extra bucks with that 20% multiplier. So if you're betting a little bit more, you're getting a little bit more with that boost. I think the max amount of the boost profit is like $50. You probably won't even touch that number unless you're obviously a big spender. But always, stay cool, bet responsibly. But yeah, every single week this is available. It's one per week per customer. No opt-in required. Go over, take your favorite bet. Maybe it's just the Bombers on the spread, minus 115. Click the apply 20% multiplier, and you get a little extra juice on that Bomber spread.
Right on. Well, Jake, listen, I'm looking forward to getting into the lock shop with you tomorrow. And again, huge thanks to the entire Coolbet team for their great support of WST and making these shows, which are so popular every single year with Winnipeg Jet fans and our audience, possible. We're going to get at it. And again, folks, if you haven't played a Coolbet before, use the promo code WST. We'll hook you up right out of the gate with a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit. Start breaking down those soccer lines, Jake, tomorrow. I'll talk to you at noon over on the Edmonton Sports Talk channel before we're live here in LV.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Huss.
Thanks so much. There's Jake Bolin Moss. Give Jake a follow as well, at Jake Bolin Moss, and of course at Coolbet Canada. Myself, Dustin Nielsen, with our daily picks and all the content in the lock shop. Noon Winnipeg time before WST, Monday to Friday, over at Edmonton Sports Talk. Fish on the road. They will continue this road trip right through the weekend, but are back next weekend. Start making plans to get to the ballpark if you haven't been there yet. Goldeyes.com, individual tickets, group tickets, patio parties like we had as well. If you're looking to set something up, the great staff there will be more than happy to help you out, and we'll hopefully see the Goldeyes get on a nice roll coming back home and have those bats going again. Shout out to our friends at Assiniboia Downs. We're going to have to do a special pick for Canada Day on our way back, assuming we get back in time for that. Always a big day of live racing when there's a holiday. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, and throughout the summer, live racing at ASD. We'll get back to our picks head-to-head next Tuesday on the program when we are back and we are live. And, of course, you can bet on that track everywhere else, hpibet.com as well, and assiniboiadowns.com for information on reservations in the dining room for the prime rib buffet, as well as all the other events happening on the weekend throughout the summer over at Assiniboia Downs. I'll shout out our friends at Aikens Lake Wilderness Lodge as well. I cannot wait to get out there in about a month or so when we get back. Highlight of the year, each and every year. If you're looking for a world-class flying fishing destination where you can be on the water in less than 2 hours from the city of Winnipeg, Aikens Lake is the spot. Go to aikenslake.com for more information and availabilities for the remainder of the 2024 fishing season. And they're at the Rocket Mortgage today. Let's do a quick look at this for, speaking of Coolbet, of course, one of the other members of the Coolbet team is Taylor Pendrith, who has had his best results as a pro at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, a former T2. He had a T2 and a top 10 last year as well. But the top Canadian's actually Ben Silverman. And Silverman's at 5 under. Rye and Tyler Montgomery right now 6 under par, though Montgomery's done it through 10 holes. Cam Young's at 5 under. Who else do we have here? There's a lot of guys that jump in and get into this tournament that might not be there each and every week but I see Roger Sloan's 3 under through 14 as well. Just kind of do a quick look down for Pendy, Svenny, and the rest of the Canadians in the market. Pendy's, he's just on to the back 9 right now. He's 1 under. Still in a pretty good position. And there's our pal Adam Svensson, who is even through 18. Gonna have to be a lot better tomorrow, though, to make the cut. And again, shout out to Breezy Bend for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. All our golf reports throughout the year brought to you by Breezy Bend. Go to breezybend.ca for more information on membership, as well as wedding rentals and more at just a beautiful facility just outside the city on the west side, technically out in Headingley. All right, well, listen, great show. We do apologize for a little audio issue that we had earlier on, but it is all fixed. Remo's got it together. And now, Remo, speaking of quick turnarounds, like our rescheduled flights yesterday, we have a quick turnaround because there is a Vezina trophy to be handed out, and we're going to get down the street to the Fontainebleau and hopefully be there to see Connor Hellebuck pick up the hardware as expected by everybody that watched the National Hockey League this year.
Yeah, I can't wait. What time is it at? It's at 4 o'clock here. So I guess that is a bit of a turnaround. They just sent out an updated schedule, Huss, too. So we do have transportation now, which is great.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things we didn't get to touch on before we go, Huss. The new jerseys. I think Fanatics, we're going to get a closer look at them this weekend.
We're going to see them tomorrow.
We're going to see them, but the Kings that we did, I think the logo on the Kings one is massive, but I like the redesign. The Ducks, orange. I think it's better than what they had before. They should go back to the original ones, but they seem to not want to do that. And there was a quote yesterday from Gary Bettman, Huss, and I don't know who asked him this, but this is something we've been on top of for a while. Eric Engel is tweeting out, Gary Bettman confirms Alex Morello advised the league that he wouldn't pursue reactivating the Coyotes.
Oh, yes.
And he was asked if it's possible the original Jets history records could be returned to the team. Gary Bettman called it an excellent question, but said it was too early to say. And I think we can all agree it is an excellent question. I think there's a lot of confusion that's unnecessary that happens whenever any Winnipeg Jets set a record. And I think it is too early to say. Like, they've been dealing with this $1 billion transaction, getting Arizona to Utah. I don't think the records is on the forefront. So I think we'll wait and see. But the fact that he didn't say immediate no, shut it down, called it an excellent question, I think it's going to happen. I think it's something that's going to happen. So get ready for it.
I'm telling you right now, what is it? Today is June 27th. WST, I'm calling it right now. The records will come back. What happened? Like, whatever. I'm fine if the Thrashers records are part of it as well. They were a team. They are part of this Winnipeg Jets history. There was a whole bunch of players that were the core of the first 6, 7, 8 years of Jets 2.0 with Thrashers. If they don't want to just throw those out and have them mothballed, I'm fine with that. But Winnipeg Jets need Winnipeg Jets history. We'll know there's some 1.0. We'll know there's some 2.0, but it should be there, and they sure as hell shouldn't be mothballed along with what remains of the Arizona Coyotes history. So that'll be something that is coming. But yes, to your point, there's some other fires to put out for Commissioner Bettman first.
Yeah, we never touched on like Alex Merrill, the land. I mean, how much do we want to keep talking about this? The land auction got canceled, so he dropped out, and yet he's relinquishing his 5-year exclusivity window to, quote, reactivate the Coyotes. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, if there is an NHL team coming to Arizona, he will not be the owner.
And that's the best bit of news for fans in the Phoenix area. They need a legitimate owner, a respected owner to come in with the big money. The NHL wants to be there. They absolutely. I mean, think of what they've gone through. And listen, as a market, if they have the rink in the right spot, they have the population, it'll work. But I mean, the mullet era was an absolute joke, and almost everything that organization did for the better part of the time that they were there from moving to Winnipeg was one misstep after another misstep. But the biggest problem, the biggest reason why the Coyotes are in Utah right now was the negligent ownership of the Morello Group. So the fact that they are just simply moving on, great news for the National Hockey League, great news for the Desert, but good on Ryan Smith and the Utah people for taking advantage of the situation and getting Salt Lake City into the league. And there'll be an expansion team. The league will make a ton of cash from it. And there will be hockey in the Desert. And all of you that love those trips down to Phoenix before to see the Jets play will hopefully get to do it again a little bit later on. Keep an eye on our socials later on. We'll have some stuff from the NHL awards tonight. And then tomorrow, a big show. We're going to be checking in and probably doing some pre-recorded stuff with a bunch of folks tonight and tomorrow before we get live. And then everything to do with the Jets situation coming into tomorrow. We're expecting Murat Atesh and Ken Wiebe both to join us live here as well. Other guests coming up. And then it's draft time, and we'll be cranking stuff out throughout Friday night and Saturday as well with the latest on the draft and everything around your Winnipeg Jets. Once again, a big thanks to our presenting sponsor, Coolbet, for everything they've done for us, allowing to make this trip happen, and all of our other sponsors. Thanks to the patience for everyone that was with us on YouTube at the beginning of the show as well. And good luck to Connor Hellebuyck tonight for the Vezina Trophy. We'll talk about it tomorrow on Draft Day, live from Vegas, right here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks again for hanging out with us.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.